Josh Frydenberg, welcome.
Good morning.
Mate, one of the things that has alarmed a lot of Australians, particularly in the last few weeks during this pretty nasty campaign, is the rise of anti-Semitism in Australia. We've seen your posters defaced in a pretty nasty, vicious way. This morning we've seen that Katie Allen's photo in her posters in Higgins have been defaced in a similar way. What is the cause of this rise, and how concerned are you about it?
And you could add to that list Julian Lisa, another Jewish member who's also faced anti-Semitic graffiti and vandalism, and those Labor candidates who have said pretty abhorrent things about Israel, but also about Jews more generally, and that's been of concern. Look, anti-Semitism is on the rise globally. It's also been on the rise here in Australia. The number of incidents has increased quite dramatically. What was most offensive, Michael, about the swastikas on my boards was the insult to the victims of the Holocaust and to their families. And when you think about that tragedy, clearly people today have not learnt the lessons of history. It was also a great insult to Australian servicemen and women who fought against Nazi tyranny under the Australian flag against this level of fascism. And so it has no place in Australia. All good-minded people from both sides of the political divide have spoken out, need to be speaking out, because vigilance is certainly the price of liberty.
We saw some pretty nasty attacks on Tony Abbott's billboards, and the Katie Allen billboard this morning has the C word written on it with the swastika. This kind of vicious nastiness in Australian politics, some people attribute it to Green-related supporters. We saw the attack on Scott Morrison yesterday. Is enough being done by parties perhaps like the Greens to stamp out this type of behaviour? Because there seems to be, pretty prevalent amongst Green supporters this willingness just to go beyond the normal bounds that we've seen in Australian politics before.
Well, Michael, there's extremism on the left and there's extremism on the right, but obviously the egging of the Prime Minister is completely unacceptable at so many levels. One, it's the disrespect to our leader, our elected leader. But also about the security ramifications of someone being able to get so close to the Prime Minister. But Richard di Natale's got extremism in his own ranks. I mean, you've seen them lose in recent days their candidate for Layla because of their racist comments. So the Greens try to be holier than thou. They always try to adopt the moral high ground, but they do need to look in their own backyard. Their policies are also very extreme, not just their people. Their policies are extreme, particularly about the US-Australia alliance. Now, this alliance is fundamental, it's totemic to our security as a nation. We share the same values and we share a lot of history with the United States. And but for the United States' positive role in the world, but for its forward deployments in our region, but for the fact that it has lost much human treasure, as well as put enormous financial commitments into stabilising global hotspots through this century and the last. Without that, we would be a much it would be a much more dangerous society, and so we need to maintain our commitment to the US-Australia alliance, and certainly the Greens don't do that.
No, they don't. Let's turn to economic matters. There's been a lot of talk about what's going to happen to the housing market under Shorten's pretty punitive new taxes. And the one thing that we know
punitive is actually a word that even Paul Keating used against the Labor Party. So here's Michael Kroger and PJ Keating
agreeing
on a unity ticket, at least on the downside of Labor's taxes.
The one thing that you can't model is sentiment. And you can just feel everywhere in the housing sector, developers, builders, whatever, that under the new changes that Shorten's proposing to bring in, that you're going to see a downturn in the property market. I mean, we've already seen it, and we're going to see it it's going to be worse under Labor. What's your message to homeowners, to people in the property sector, going forward as to what the fallout's likely to be from Labor's policies?
It's very simple. If you own your own home, it'll be worth less under Labor. If you rent your home, you'll end up paying more under Labor. It's as simple as that. And that's not my word against Chris Bowen or Bill Shorten. That's actually the word of the experts. SQM, which is one of the leading property analysts in the country, said that Labor's policy will lead to an increase of rents by up to 22%. So if you're renting here in Victoria, that's $65 a week, $3,500 a year. If you're in Queensland, it's $90 a week. If you own your own home, its value could go down by up to 16%. Now, the consequential impact of that, Michael, on household spending and confidence is quite significant. We know so many small businesses mortgage their family home in order to borrow to expand their business. And if their home is worth less because of Labor's policy, then that will have a broader impact. We know household consumption is about 60% of GDP. Now, Bill Shorten showed in last night's debate and in previous debates that he doesn't know the detail of his own policy, or he's simply hiding the truth from the Australian people, because Scott Morrison put him on the spot and asked him to tell the Australian people what would be the true impact on home prices and rents of his policy, and he dodged that question. And he has been on the record, Bill Shorten, of saying his own policy will reduce house prices. Chris Bowen has been on the record saying the whole purpose of the policy is to put downward pressure on prices. So Labor can't have it both ways. They can't say there's going to be no appreciable impact on prices, and on the other hand be on the record saying the policy is designed to put downward pressure on prices. I think this is a really big issue in the electorate because the Labor Party have no feel for the economy. Certainly their record is only of higher deficits, and at this election they're proposing $387 billion of higher taxes. And they can promise the world, but the more they promise and the more they spend, the more they tax. And the more they tax, the weaker the Australian economy is.
My colleague Stephen Conroy wanted me to ask you about the effect on the budget of those earning over $180,000 a year. This seems to be a theme of Labor's. There's some big deal about this. What is the answer to that issue? I mean, it's not as if the Treasury's modelled every single part of the budget.
It's quite typical of the Labor Party to be trying to knock the government when it's trying to cut taxes. I mean, here's the difference between the two sides. Labor's for higher taxes, we're for lower taxes. Now, in the budget, Michael, there was $158 billion of tax cuts. They have focused on the low and middle income earners. The most significant reform is the one that we are delivering a reduction in the rate of tax from 32.5 cents in the dollar to 30 cents in the dollar for everyone earning between $45,000 and $200,000. So over 9 million Australian taxpayers fall into that bracket that we're creating. That's about 70% of taxpayers, and they'll pay no more than 30 cents in the dollar. And that's all about getting rid of bracket creep. Now, we have not changed the top rate of tax. So for those above 180 or later to be $200,000, the Labor Party have. They're increasing it, even though Bill Shorten couldn't come clean with that worker in Gladstone that confronted him the other day.
He said he was going to look at it.
He was going to look at it. But you know what he's looking at? Well, it's actually what his policy is, to increase it
by 2%. Yeah.
So the key point is this. We outlined the cost to the budget of $158 billion of lower taxes. But what we will see as a result of our policy, the progressive nature of our tax system continue, so that the top 5% of taxpayers, which equates basically to the top marginal rate of tax, will pay about a third of the overall tax burden, and someone who earns $200,000 will pay 10 times as much tax as someone who pays $45,000. So not only have we put the cost to the budget for everyone to see, but we've also maintained the progressive nature of our tax system.
I'm not sure why they're so obsessed about this number, given what you just said, but anyway, that's
That's Stephen Conroy.
That's Stephen, yes. Well, he was a minister in the Rudd government, so that says it all.
And leopards never change their spots.
They don't. Finally, the economy, you change the government, you'll change the economy. And
the country.
And the country. We've seen the growth numbers, they're well known. We've seen the growth in employment. We've seen the growth in profits amongst the large corporate sector. But there are lots of headwinds. A number of people think that under a Labor government, Australia's headed for a recession or close to a recession, that it's going to be an economic downturn under Labor because of the massive tax burden they're putting on businesses and individuals. Where do you feel the economy is going to go under a short government in the first couple of years?
Certainly go down. Certainly be weaker. Certainly you'll see fewer jobs, lower growth, less investment. That is ultimately what happens when you strangle the economy with $387 billion of high taxes. I mean, it's on retirees who have done nothing wrong, and there's more than 1 million of them, and they are waiting there for Bill Shorten. They are very, very angry because Bill Shorten has called them effectively tax cheats. Whereas you take away $57 billion from retirees and you're going to reduce their disposable income and economic activity. You whack a housing tax on a property market which has already seen prices come down, and as we discussed, you are going to see fewer jobs, less construction, and lower prices and higher rents. Add to that a 50% increase in the capital gains tax. Superannuation. It's important that people be able to save and be encouraged to save. But somehow the Labor Party thinks it's okay, Michael, to whack them with higher taxes. So if you're a mother who's left the workforce for a few years to raise your child, Bill Shorten will say, now you can no longer make catch-up concessional contributions. This policy of his is targeting women in particular who are taking time off to raise their family. Family businesses with Labor's changes to discretionary trusts be hit. 300,000 family businesses are going to be hit with higher taxes and income tax. Labor is increasing the highest marginal rate, and they're doing so with a so-called deficit levy at a time that they're promising higher surpluses. Go figure. All of this will strangle the economy. All of this will lead to fewer jobs. So there's really a clear choice for the Australian people of this election. The coalition under Scott Morrison, which has delivered more than 1.3 million new jobs, which has an economic plan that's set out in the budget, paying back Labor's debt, creating more apprentices, lowering taxes, spending $100 billion on infrastructure, and guaranteeing our essential services, hospitals and schools, all without increasing taxes. And Bill Shorten, who will basically give the keys to the economy to the union movement, will allow them to dominate our workplaces, will pit employer versus employee, will increase taxes, will reopen free trade agreements. This is going to be a throwback to an era that has not served Australia well in the past.
People are going to have to hang on to their hats under this government.
And they should be
if they get elected.
They should be very, very concerned about the threat that Bill Shorten poses to the Australian economy, to their jobs, to their wages, to their family.
Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, thanks for your time today. Good luck on Saturday week.
Good to be with you, Michael.